Gross domestic product is one of the most widely used measures of an economy's output or production. It is defined as the total value of goods and services produced within a country's border in a specific period, monthly, quarterly, or annually. GDP is an accurate indicator of the output of an economy, and the GDP's growth rate is probably the single best indicator of the economic growth. GDP enables policymakers and central banks to judge whether the economy is contracting or expanding and promptly take whatever necessary action to be taken. It also allows policymakers, economists, and business people to analyze the impact of variables such as monetary and fiscal policy, economic shocks, tax, and spending plans. GDP can be calculated through the expenditure, income, or value added approaches. GDP isn't a flawless indicator, it overlooks several important factors. The ability of GDP to give an overall picture of the state of the economy to that of a satellite in a space that can survey the weather across an entire continent. GDP enables policymakers and central banks to judge whether the economy is contracting or expanding, whether it needs a boost or needs to be restrained, and if threats such as recession or rampant inflation is coming. Most nations release GDP data every month and quarterly. In the US, the Bureau of Economic Analysis (BEA) publishes an advance release of quarterly GDP 4 weeks after the quarter ends, and a final release 3 months after the quarter ends. It contains a wealth of detail enabling economists and investors to obtain information and insights on various aspects of the economy. The advanced GDP data has the most impact on the markets as it is the first snapshot of how well the economy is performing. Subsequent releases have limited market impact unless there is a significant variance from the advanced GDP figure. This is due to the amount of time that elapses between the quarter end and these releases. GDP can be calculated through the expenditure approach and the sum of everyone's spending in an economy over a particular period. The expenditure approach is the more common one and is obtained by summing up total consumption, government spending, investment, and net exports, and many other things. A formula for GDP is GDP equals C plus I plus D plus X minus M, where C is private consumption or consumer spending, I is business spending, G is government spending, X is equals value of exports, M equals the value of imports. GDP fluctuates because of the business cycle. When the economy is booming and GDP is rising, there comes a point when inflationary pressure builds up rapidly as labor and productive capacity near full utilization. Okay, this leads the central bank to commence a cycle of tighter monetary policy to cool down the overheating of economy and its inflation. As interest rates rise, companies and consumers cut back spending and the economy slows down. Slowing demands lead companies to lay off employees, further affecting consumer confidence and demands. To break this vicious circle, the central bank eases monetary policy to stimulate economic growth and employment until the economy is booming once again. This cycle repeats over a period of time. What are the drawbacks of GDP? Now let's analyze that. GDP does not account for the underground economy. It relies on official data. Okay, so it does not consider the extent of the underground economy, which can be significant in some nations. It is geographically limited in a global open economy. Gross national product (GNP), which measures the output from the citizens and companies of a particular nation regardless of their location, is viewed as a better measure of output than GDP in some cases. For instance, GDP does not consider profits earned in a nation by overseas companies that are remitted back to foreign investors. This can overstate a country's actual economic output. GDP emphasizes economic output without considering economic well-being. GDP growth alone cannot measure a nation's development or its citizens' well-being. For example, a country may be experiencing rapid GDP growth, but this may impose a significant cost to societies regarding environmental impact and an increase in income disparity. GDP is also important because it allows economists to learn about global trends. For instance, China and India have succeeded despite their massive populations, with China's GDP growing from 149 billion in 1978 to 17.96 trillion in 2022. India experienced a slower growth pace over same period, 137 billion to 3.4 trillion. GDP allows policymakers and central banks to make adjustments and decisions, gives economic analysis data that helps them see the effects of decisions, and it is widely regarded as one of the best indicators of country's output. While GDP is widely regarded as the most accurate indicator of a country's output, it doesn't include transactions that occur off the market or account for income inequality within the country. It also doesn't consider profits earned in one country and remitted to another.